Welcome to episode 160 of the XS Noize Podcast. I'm Mark Millar. Thanks for listening. In this episode, I speak to Chris Turpin, one half of British indie blues rock duo Ida Mae, about their latest LP, Thunder Above You. If you missed the previous episode, I spoke to Denise Pearson, lead singer of iconic pop group 5 Star. So check it out, and if you like the podcast, please subscribe on your favourite listening platform, give us a rating, and leave a comment. Ida Mae are husband and wife duo Chris Turpin and Stephanie Jean Ward. They met while studying at university, quickly bonding over their mutual passion for music and later forming their first band, Kill It Kid. Penning 3 critically acclaimed records, they spent their early 20s touring extensively across Europe. Recorded in just 7 days, their new album, Thunder Above You, marks the most significant creative period in Ida Mae's career. It follows months of touring the States with legendary artists including Willie Nelson and Lucinda Williams, driving from clubs to arena shows while being inspired by the dramatic landscapes that surrounded them. In this interview, Chris Turpin talks about the new album, songwriting, and much more. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the XS Noize Podcast with Chris Turpin from Ida Mae. So hi Chris, welcome to the XS Noize Podcast.
It's great, thanks for having us. Pleasure to be here.
I'd like to go back to the start. So how did you meet Stephanie and when did you decide to form Ida Mae?
Oh wow, it seems like 100 years ago. We both met at university. We were studying in Bath, and we were both doing different music degrees. And Stephanie came to one of my open mic nights. I was playing 2 or 3 open mic nights a week in and around Bath, just desperately trying to get better and learn my trade, learn my craft. And I ended up headlining one at an old bar called The Porter, which doesn't exist anymore in Bath, but it was quite a famous little sort of underground kind of arts scene. And you'd have everyone from wizards playing bongos to sort of, chaps playing all sorts of weird and wonderful instruments that are made at home. It was quite an interesting scene. Anyway, I played there and she saw me, and I was busy at the time working with a few people, and I'd put a band together, and I thought she'd be a fantastic second singer. And a lot of people had said, you got to hear her sing. She's fantastic. So that's how we ended up meeting. I asked her if she'd be up for being in this band that I was putting together. She said yes. And that was probably 4 or 5 years before Ida Mae. We were in a rock band for a while, which kind of disintegrated as rock bands do. And we formed Ida Mae, about 5 years ago. And the premise being that we wanted to write very pure, simple, honest songs that would work just on an acoustic guitar. And we had quite a lot of interest quite early on, which is a surprise to us. And that's sort of how Ida Mae came together. And we ended up cutting the first album on 3 different labels and then moved to Nashville for the first record.
3 different labels? What happened there?
It's a long story. So we signed to Decca, so Universal, which is a bit of a dream come true for me, because Decca is, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and the name, the logo. But we had some issues, I think, with what we had delivered, and the A&R people there got a little confused. Long story short, our management said, look, we don't want to be here anymore. We want to leave. So we'd finished recording half of the album with producer Ethan Johns on Universal. And then we'd considered finishing the rest of the record ourselves with Ethan. But we had an old contact get in touch, a chap called Seymour Stein, who some of your listeners might know, who'd had some dealings with our previous rock and roll band. And he said, sort of, stop the press. I want to sign you to Sire Records and to Warner. So we signed to Warner Brothers and Sire Records, and they finished the first album. It helped get us visas to move out to the US, which is where our management company was at the time. So that's what happened. We finished the record and we flew out. We had a connecting flight in Iceland to get to Dallas, Texas, which is where we were going to touch down, having just moved out of our bed sit in London to move to Nashville. And on landing in Iceland for our connecting flight, I had 15 missed calls from our management. So hang on a minute, what's all this about? What's going on here? And long story short, Seymour Stein left Warner's and left Sire, and everyone was left afloat at the that he'd signed. This is on the flight to move our lives to America. So long story short, we then ended up working with the incredible 30 Tigers for those first 2 albums in the US, and they sort of became part of our sort of Nashville help. So yeah, that's how it came together.
I always find that amazing about record companies. You know, as you say, you're signed by a certain person, and then they're taking you on board, and then when they leave and someone else takes over, they get rid of bands. It just doesn't make sense.
It's a really back to front way of doing business, right? Huge investment at the beginning, and then if it doesn't happen, well, we just sort of let it go. It's a really odd way of doing business, and like you say, personally, I feel like a lot of people in record companies and in the music industry sort of, some of them wanted to be in bands, some of them were in bands, some of them wanted to be, you know, that singer, that Jeff Buckley, you know, whoever it might have been or whatever. So I think there's a bit of an ego there. So when a new person sweeps into a record company, I think it's like, okay, I want it to be mine now. So that kind of clean sweep thing, it is shocking, but I see why people do it. But it's also why we're in part of the situation we are in now with major record companies kind of struggling to stay valid and to look after artists that they do own. It's a shark pen out there.
It absolutely is. 100%. Ida Mae, you have a unique sound that blends blues, folk, rock. How did you develop your musical style, and what artists influenced your music the most?
Well, it's quite a big and difficult question, I guess. But really, from the outset, I've been when I was younger, 15, I was a big fan of country blues music, which I was quite an odd kid, you know, like listening to people like Mississippi Fred McDowell and Blind Willie McTell and Reverend Gary Davis. So that's where some of my early guitar influence came from. And at the same time, my dad was taking me out to see Bert Jansch and Martin Simpson and a lot of kind of folky guitar players. So I kind of had that as a basis, but very quickly kind of fell into a Free, you know, and Led Zeppelin. And then all of a sudden, especially here in the UK, we had that influx of bands like the Black Keys and the White Stripes. And they all kind of came together for me at a really interesting moment. And I saw them all as one and the same, whether it was a sort of Americana or American roots music or British folk music. They all kind of, I could hear the influence was coming from a very similar place in technique and style and arrangement and lyrics. So I had that side of things. And Steph grew up just south of London, and she had her mum's from Northern Ireland. So she grew up with a lot of folk music. She had a lot of 12-string singing and sort of high-pitched Joan Baez covers. That was part of her musical upbringing. And she was made to do a lot of piano when she was younger, and she really got into jazz piano. So she became, you know, people like Ella Fitzgerald and Billie Holiday were sort of where she wanted to exist, I think. So they kind of, both of those influences kind of naturally came together in some ways for Ida Mae. But we were aiming, I don't know, we really cared about the song. So I know a little bit of Townes Van Zandt, a little bit of Lucinda Williams, a little bit of Dylan, and, you know, all the traditional things that I've already mentioned kind of came together as one whole. But we've tried quite hard to not take influence from one specific band, because immediately as a duo, people say, oh, you must be like, you know, girl boy duo. You're like the White Stripes or the Civil Wars or Dave Rawlings and Gillian Welsh or whoever it might be. And we never really listened very closely to any of those people, if I'm honest. We loved the songs, but there was no sort of blueprint taken from any band for us. So we just sort of, whatever felt natural, we've run with.
Well, you've recently released your third album, Thunder Above You. It's excellent. I've been playing it quite a lot. You recorded the album in 7 days in a mansion. You know, that's quite something. Why did you decide to record the album so quickly? Did you already have the songs written so you could just go bang straight in?
No, probably just a fit of insanity, really. No, Stephanie was 7 months pregnant at the time. And we had released an album during the pandemic, and we were kind of umming and ahhing about how we should release the next album. And rather than going and talking to labels and distributors, we thought, well, you know what? We don't have time for all that. We just got to record a record. So we've been collecting over the years quite a lot of analog recording equipment, microphones and tape machines. And because of the pandemic, we'd partly self-produced our last album. So we thought, you know what, let's do it ourselves. Let's just go and do it. So we had this harebrained scheme of, okay, we'll do it. And then we decided that we'd really missed recording live. From Chasing Lights, our first album, was tracked mainly live with some overdubs. Click Click Domino, our second record, though we performed a lot of that live, just me and Steph, we were stuck in Nashville during the pandemic, so we couldn't play live with drummer and bass player. So we wanted to do that. So that was kind of necessity of Steph being 7 months pregnant, and the fact that we wanted to track it live, that we thought, well, I think we can probably get 2 songs done a day and do it in 7 days. So the songs came together pretty quickly. I had little bits of song from different recording sessions, bits and pieces that we had, bits that recorded on the road. And we kind of set ourselves a target of, okay, we've got, 3 weeks to finish these songs, and let's get in this studio. So that's what we did. The insane thing was trying to build the studio in a day. So we shipped all of our gear in 2 carloads, about 5 hours away to where I grew up in Norwich, on the sort of near the east coast of the UK in Norfolk. And we had enough money for an engineer. So we had a great engineer with us who helped to kind of rig everything up. But even things like trying to find 28 mic stands, stuff like that, and enough cables was complete insanity. But we managed to rig it all together. And within about 4 or 5 hours, we had an operational studio, which was kind of incredible.
And what was it like recording in a mansion? That's quite rock and roll. I can think offhand, Radiohead recorded OK Computer in a mansion. Led Zeppelin recorded an album in a mansion.
Yeah, it has some pretty good rock and roll kudos, Well, you have to have a story, right? As you know, as a podcast, it's like everyone has to have a story with the record, right? So our first record, they typically have a story. Our second record was Nashville pandemic touring. And it's like, okay, well, how can we make this more special? And not wanting to just go into a studio and record songs, which is probably what most normal people would have done.
It must have been nice and relaxing.
It was, it was. So I grew up in the little 2 up, 2 down, over the road from this house, this mansion house that I didn't even know existed. It was hidden. I walked past it on my way to school every day, half an hour, and I wouldn't have known it was there. And it was hidden close to where I was born and grew up. And it just so happened that a few summers back, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, we'd been out, we'd made some friends, and I got to know the son of the guy that owns this beautiful house, and he happens to be a huge music fan, fantastic music taste. So this is how we got into this mansion house. As I said, well, hey, look, I've got this mad idea. We'll only be there a week, in and out. What do you say? And it was magic because we were all able to stay at the house, kind of under one roof. And Steph cooked most of the evenings, and it was the summer, so we could, go out and play frisbee and hang out and drink cups of tea. And it was particularly magic because there was no outside influence. There's no A&R person knocking on the door. There's no other bands in the room next door. There's no concern about, anything other than purely recording and getting the take as good as we felt as musicians it could be. So it was a really unique experience, and I think you can hear that on the record.
I suppose now, the next step up for the next album, it has to be a castle.
Oh, mate, I'm already on it. Wouldn't that be great?
Slane Castle,
I'd love that. Who knows? Yeah, there's some things around the corner that might include castles. We'll see.
Well, let's talk about some of the tracks on the album. The first track I heard from the album was, in fact, it was the first single, was My Whispers Are Wildfire. What can you tell me about that track, the sort of genesis of it?
Yeah, that one's completely wild. I don't know really what genre that track is, if I'm honest, which I find myself with so much of our music trying to work out what is this?
But that's what's great about your music, and it's what's great about this album. You just don't know what's coming next, with each song, because there's all sorts of genres and influences coming in there.
Well, thank you. Yeah, well, that's classic records of old, right? No one was writing the same single over and over again, which we've heard so much of, I think, over the last decade, is bands trying to chase a radio song or whatever. I think it's beginning to diversify a bit now, but, we like to work, just whatever the song is, that's where we'll take it. And that's also a huge credit to Ethan Johns, who's the producer that played drums on this, and to Nick Peeney, the bass player. They're astonishing musicians, and they're able to sort of flex and move with whatever we show to them. So they're a huge part of the sound. We're not giving orders as such when we're tracking these things. But that particular song was written, I don't know, it's kind of it was, I was still coming out of Click Click Domino and all the kind of madness of social media and the end of the US election and the wild sort of nature of modern capitalism and politics and economics and news and that sort of general hubbub. And I find myself quite attracted when I'm in that mode to sort of some of the kind of subterranean homesick blues kind of Dylan lyrics, or Come Together by the Beatles, where you just get these weird words kind of put together that begin to kind of create this greater web of meaning, kind of like beat poetry almost. So those kind of the lyrics kind of fell out like that. And I like the idea of Steph being the protagonist and it being, I don't know, a song about disillusionment and confusion and sort of perhaps a female figure or a male figure, I don't know, razzing someone for money. I don't know. It's kind of a weird tune. And genre-wise, it almost reminded me of a Ry Cooder record or something, but not quite. It's weird. It's a weird sounding song. I love it.
Well, my favorite song on the album is Doing It for Badness. I just love that there. And Wild Flying Dove is also a favorite.
Great. Oh, fantastic. Well, Doing It for Badness is one of my favorites. I wrote that almost as a straight up folk song. Some of the lyrics lifted from ancient folk ballads. And I actually got the line from Steph's mum. She comes out with a lot of sort of, Irish sayings that I've never heard before. And that was one that she came out with one night, and I was like, what does that mean? She's like, oh, just, you're doing it for badness. You're doing it for the crack sort of thing. And
I know that.
I'd never heard it before. And everyone that I speak to doesn't know it either. And I thought, oh, wow, that's such a cool, strange, sexy line. I'll take it and bend it to my will, It's great, though. I love it. Thank you. And same with Wild Flying Dove. That lyric is again, Wild Flying Dove is taken, my love is a wild flying dove. That's a very old folk song. I think I first heard it by Tom Paxton, and there's different verses and lyrics flying out there. And I kind of wanted to reconstitute it into a new kind of more, I don't know, Woody Guthrie, Neil Young situation. One of my favorites too, especially that recording, because it's about 6 or 7 minutes long and we improvised the whole thing, and lurching into a big guitar solo when you're 5 minutes in is slightly terrifying when you track it all live, but the energy I love it for that reason.
No, I'm glad, and it's interesting that your songs are long. You're not trying to cater for the TikTok generation or for radio where, the first few bars people have to be in and they have to get the hook straight away and stuff like that. So it's quite refreshing that you're not doing that. You're just doing it old school and the way it should be.
Great. Good man. Yeah. Well, for us, it's like if you start to compromise and try and do that unnaturally, you're not making music for yourself. You're not making music for anyone then, and I think you have to be moved first. And for me, we've seen every record that we make as artistically and creatively really valuable. And we want them to be worlds that people can disappear into. So if you put on this record, we're hoping that you can live in it for that 45, 50 minutes and not want to be anywhere else. And you're completely right in terms of TikTok and streaming and playlisting. We suck. We don't fit in any of those places, but, it's what we've decided to do.
Has anyone ever tried to make you write songs for that, the cater for that sort of audience and, shorten it, say, look, we need an edit in that track?
Yeah, constantly. And we probably should, and I'm sure there's ways into doing it. But the reality is I don't know, man. It's, we've been through a lot of different stages of social media. Me and Steph started when we were 19. We got signed from MySpace. Would you believe it? Back in the day, so we've seen a lot of stages of the music industry. We've been in this for over a decade. And we've always just cared most about the music. We weren't not here to please anyone or for quick money. So I'll probably regret that in 10 years, but we'll see.
Are there any rituals or routines that you follow to get into the creative mindset when working on new music?
Good question. I find it goes in stages. Because I can kind of write whenever I need to now. I'm practiced enough in my craft that if you told me you needed to come up with a song in, 10, 20 minutes, I could do it. Something would happen. I can get things out. But I find for when we're writing our own music, I have to take a bit of a run up, and things go in stages. So I'll kind of write maybe 3 songs quickly that will all feel in one vein, and then another 3 songs in the same vein. And when I realize I'm in that sort of mode, I try and stick to it. But the main thing I try and do is just collate lyrics. I like to write lyrics before anything else, because I feel if I've got a great first line or a verse that I love, or just a turn of phrase that excites me that I haven't quite heard before, that's kind of enough to lead me down the rabbit hole and want to finish the song. So that's the main thing. I guess I wouldn't say it's a ritual as such. I mean, shit tons of coffee, that's probably the ritual as well. It's my language, but yeah, that's part of the ritual.
When you're writing songs, do you think lyrics are more important than a good melody?
Probably not. But the reality is I do love lyrics. I think just because you can dive into them more. There's so much you can pull out of a good song lyrically. And I think the majority of people don't care. I mean, I lived in Nashville, and I've been writing with Nashville writers who will 100%, majority of the time tell you that melody and simplicity is more important. I think there's the famous line from one of the Nashville guys, which is, is keep it simple, stupid. That's the kind of mantra for that style of writing. But I don't know. I love lyric and I love melody. Everything has to go hand in hand, really. But that's what gets me kind of going, I think. And I grew up in church choirs as well, so I have an ear for melody. But I also like rhythm. I think it's from the early blues influence that was there when I was much, much younger. That sort of the rhythmics, like Whispers of Wildfire, for example. It's all about the rhythm in the melody more than it is the melody, so it all goes hand in hand.
What song on the album do you feel most connected to?
I really love the last track on the album, Hold You Like Fading Light, because
I love the guitars on that.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, we put it last on the record, and I thought no one would notice it, but it seems to be a lot of people's favorite. And that was one of those songs, I loved the idea of writing songs that sound like they could have been written 500 years ago. Songs that sound like they've pre-existed, that say something that's pre-existed, that's, and I think that song, I hope, has an element of that in that chorus line, and I hold you like fading light. I don't know where that came from, but I loved it when it came out. And it's one of those songs where it's a very short verse. It's a very intense, sort of intimate lyric. And I just feel like that particular performance, which is very late at night, I think it was a first or a second take, just seemed to embody everything that I was trying to achieve with that song. Even some of the guitar tone is just insane. And it was almost a bit of a fluke, it just kind of fell out that way. And it's one I'm really, really proud of. So that's probably the way that was recorded. It felt very special. And other tracks on the record, it's kind of like picking children. I love all of them. Doing It for Badness is one of my favorites. Yeah, I love all of them. I can't pick, really.
And you mentioned Ethan Jones. He plays drums on this record, whereas before he's produced. He's produced some of my favorite records from like Paul McCartney, Turin Breaks, Kings of Leon, Ryan Adams. The list goes on. What's it like working with him?
He's wonderful. Yeah, he's wonderful. He's a fantastic chap. We owe a lot of I think our creative mindset to him. When we met Ethan, having sort of been burned by the music industry, even in our previous bands, to sort of Ida Mae, he came in with a very sort of simple and honest sort of mantra. We're going to record it live. We're going to do minimal takes. And it kind of became, it's a funny thing to say, but, we spoke a little about the music industry and, you got to do something for TikTok or keep it short or for the radio or what have you. And as a young artist, when you're thrown into those record deals, that kind of gives you some psychic baggage. Every time you go to write a song or record something or play something, there's kind of like, there's something in the back of your mind. You're kind of tainted by some of that industry. And I think Ethan was very good at stripping that all away. And all of a sudden we felt like we were kids in a garage, playing Nirvana Nevermind for the first time or whatever. It was like, okay, all right. So just like feeling good about what we're playing and having put in the work to writing the songs is enough. Now we're just going to record it. That was, in simple terms, for that first record, really important. But he just has an incredible history of, and an incredible encyclopedic knowledge, the way he makes records. And you mentioned, the some of those Ryan Adams records and the Laura Marling records. And, he plays drums on all of Ray LaMontagne. He plays drums on a lot of those records. He plays everything on some of them. Many people don't know. So to have him in the room, he's a pretty powerful force. So yeah, we've learned a lot from him, and you go with his gut, and he's become a good friend and a sweet guy. But yeah, he's a pretty cool dude to work with.
If people want to understand the music of Ida Mae, what are the 5 songs they should listen to?
Oh, another great question. 5 songs. Well, I'd probably listen to Easily in Love from our first album, because that was one of the first songs that we wrote that kind of was the basis for some of what we wanted to do in Ida Mae. I'd probably listen to Reaching off our first album, because it's become somewhat of a staple for us, and it kind of hits some of those Americana, Woody Guthrie, slightly British kind of sensibilities. I'd probably listen to Click Click Domino from the second album, because you can hear our rock and roll oddity kind of coming out there. And then I'd probably listen to Hold You Like Fading Light, as we just mentioned, from the new record. And lastly, I'd probably listen to Steph singing Little Liars from our second album, which was an interesting one because it shows more of our production that we were trying to achieve on that record, which is kind of melding these older, pre-Civil War instrument sounds with more modern recording technology and tape machines and drum machines and synthesizers. So that wasn't so hard there. I got to 5 quite quickly.
I know, but the chemistry between you both, is quite evident, in your performances. So how do you maintain a strong musical partnership whilst also being a couple off stage?
It's all we've ever known, really. We met making music, as I said, right from the top. So it's all we've ever known. And we've been very, very lucky that we're very often almost all the time, we're on the same page, pretty much. And if we're not on the same page, it's probably because something needs to be changed. So we really love singing. And I can tell that when me and Steph get together and we're really, really singing, we get that little adrenaline rush kick, of, isn't this fantastic? And it's something you can forget when you're caught up in the industry of things or the writing of things or the logistics of touring or, looking after a baby now and toddler and amongst all of this. But I know that when we sing, it's that little kick means that's what we're always trying to chase. And that I know that, again, that sort of adrenaline rush excitement, we get that when we start something new that's good, It's really exciting. So we don't really have to do too much to maintain it. Not yet. It's definitely getting harder now. We haven't had to write an album after having a baby. And that's on the cards in the coming months. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, you were saying you're back in the UK after living in Nashville for years. So is there anything you miss about Nashville or the USA?
Mainly our friends, we were, as harsh as the pandemic was for everyone globally, it was an interesting moment for us because we crashed off the road, having just been out with, to name drop, here we go, but we were out with Willie Nelson and before that Marcus King and Greta Van Fleet, and Marcus and Greta had just moved to Nashville. And normally when you're in Nashville, you do get to bump into, friends that are touring, but all of a sudden everyone was sort of stuck together, at home, which was great because, as things began to open up a little bit in the US, it meant that we could, no one was on the road, so we could hang out, and we got really, really close with a lot of my favorite musicians, people I really, really admire deeply. We got really close to, and they're now a long way away, which sucks. I was there last week, so it's not like we're not there. We don't get to see them, but that's the thing I think I miss the most. And sort of being able to, at the drop of a hat, take a tour and hit the road. We can't do that quite so easily now. We're so far away.
Just a few more, Chris.
Yeah, great.
I like to ask my guests the following questions. If you could go back and relive one musical moment from your career, what would it be?
Oh, another great question. If I could go back and relive one musical moment, we do feel extremely lucky alive in music, as much as it's, we've mentioned some of the ups and downs and left and rights. It's you do get some amazing moments. One moment, no. All right. Or maybe there's two. I don't know.
You can have two.
Oh, it's so hard to pick. All right. Well, two of them kind of would relate to New York. We got to play with Greta Van Fleet. We got to play Forest Hill Stadium in New York, which is pretty exciting. It's about 15,000 people, and it's just the two of us, So that was a huge thrill because that stadium's very historic, not too big. It was a perfect day, and there we were in New York, and it just kind of felt kind of incredible. Actually, maybe that's not it. I think actually one of my proudest moments is we opened up Newport Folk Festival a couple of years ago. So the opening slot on the main stage is quite a prestigious slot. The booker for the festival that runs the festival announces, it's the only act he announces, I believe. That's what I was told. So we were announced and we went onto the main stage at Newport Folk Festival, which is a music festival that I've watched all of my heroes play at since the dawn of time. We all know that, black and white footage of the Dylans and that sort of thing. But there was also Howlin' Wolf and Son House and a lot of those, blues guys. And it was just a really huge moment to think that we'd come from the UK, from the little families and sort of some obscurity, and somehow we'd become a little bit of the tapestry of American music culture for that moment. That for me was a huge deal. So I'd probably go do that again.
For us music fans, music is the soundtrack to our memories. What song or album, when you listen to it, brings back the best memories for you?
Oh, crikey. These are such great questions. Which brings back the best memories. I mean, that's the thing with music is you're immediately just, it's like a time travel machine. Brings back the best memories. Well, I know that my parents were listening to a lot of Solid Air by John Martin, when I was very small. So that record has, brings back, it kind of does something to me. Not sure it necessarily brings back memories, but I know that music sort of inside out. So I really care about that record. But in terms of again, there's no specific time, I don't think. I mean, we listened to a lot of Gregory Alan Isaacoff whilst touring across the US, a record called The Weatherman. That was pretty exciting to see kind of US landscape against that record. That that will bring back some pretty serious memories. But then I remember having quite an intense, I mentioned the moments when I kind of put two and two together with those early blues guys and Led Zeppelin and Fleetwood Mac. And then there's a record, The White Blood Cells by the White Stripes, came out in the UK. And it was one of those first CDs I bought from HMV, wandered down and bought it for, far too much money, or whatever, 15 quid or whatever it was. And I remember listening to the intensity of that record and going, wow, what is going on here? So that record has some importance to me. Doesn't necessarily bring back like, woohoo, I'm on holiday, great memories, but it brings back that kind of spark of, wow, what is this,
What song or album is your guilty pleasure?
Well, you know what? A lot of my guilty pleasures, as you get a little older and now I'm a dad, I don't think they're guilty anymore, So I don't even know if I should mention it, because I think I'll probably insult a lot of people. Can I put, I think it's probably, well, recently it's been Dire Straits. I've gone back to Dire Straits' first record and Mark Knopfler, which I don't think is a guilty pleasure.
No.
But, so I don't think that's a guilty pleasure, but.
Okay,
What's guilty?
What music would you be into that people wouldn't expect? But Dire Straits, definitely not guilty.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. Let me think. My wife would tell me that I'm far too obsessed with Fairport Convention right now, but again, I don't think that's a guilty pleasure. So I've got to try much harder here.
Okay, what I normally say is, if you were driving in the car and you had whatever song or album on, would you have the windows up or windows down?
Yes, that's a very good one. I'm trying to think. I'm not trying to come off so cool and aloof here that I don't have anything guilty. I'm just I've got a 1-year-old baby and a bit of a cold, so I can't think. But well, at the moment it's nursery rhymes. My word, my wife has bought a CD of nursery rhymes, so we've been blasting Incy Wincy Spider. It's not cool and it's exhausting, but here we are. Yeah. I think that's all I can think of, mate. Yeah, in terms of guilty pleasures, I'm trying to think of one more, but it's not coming.
No, that's good. Nursery rhymes is fine. Is there anything you would like to mention before we wrap up? Anything coming up in the immediate future?
No, I guess it's just, vinyl records for sale. We've got some limited edition vinyl records for any real music listeners. And in terms of the recording, because I know you'll have audiophiles listening to this, we worked really hard on this record because it was a very live and open space surrounded by wood paneling, all pretty much in one room together, tracking, including the majority of the vocals. Everything is live and improvised. The guitar solos, a few overdubs here and there, but it's pretty much live. And in recording in that way, a lot of the microphones are very live. So the drums are spilling onto the vocals hitting into the guitar mic, what have you. Creates this huge sense of acoustic, where you're all in it together. And with that, your hands are tied somewhat with how you can record it, present it, mix it, and master it. So this record is really open. And what I mean by that is it's not really compressed. It's not overly compressed. It's not slammed to make it really, really loud. It's not like so much of what you hear on Spotify now, which is, loud and attention grabbing. This record couldn't be handled in that way just due to the nature of how it was recorded. So if people get a kick out of a real sense of depth and acoustic space, I think this is a great record to listen to for that reason. So, and then vinyl is the best way to listen to it.
Yeah. Well,
that's probably the last.
Now that you mention it, what's your opinion on spatial audio? Because that seems to be the thing that's coming through now with Dolby Atmos and stuff like that there.
Yeah. I've had some friends I've been working in Dolby Atmos, and I think it's a fantastic idea, and that any new way to experience music, I think, is great. I think the difficulty is we only have two ears. You know what I mean? And you go to a show, you don't experience things behind you. I think if you were recording something specifically for Dolby Atmos, for example, where you're really getting a sense of the space, and people had the environments to really immerse themselves and listen to music in that way. I think that's pretty special. And I'm sure as an art and craft, it's only going to develop, especially on the mixing front. But going back, say, and taking older stereo records and trying to Atmos them is a whole thing. I haven't experienced it yet myself, but I'm not sure how I'd feel about it, because so much of a record is how you would see a band and experience a band live. I almost want to. It's like you looking at the stage or the room that they're in. So, it kind of scares me if a cowbell suddenly is beneath me or back of my head, isn't it?
So can you tell the listeners before you go where they can actually buy the record?
Yeah, head over to our website. I think it's idamaemusic.com, or find links on Instagram or Spotify. It's all there to find, different links for the UK and the US. We'll speak soon, Mark. I'm sure we'll see you again. Cheers, mate.
All right, mate. Take it easy. Bye-bye.
You too.